Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
February 24th, 2019. It's already Oscars time again, everybody. So happy Academy Awards Day.
Happy Academy Awards Day.
Woo. That's right. And so, hey guys, this is Mike from the band Sunspot and See You on the Other Side. I am joined by my trusty drummer,
Wendy from the band Sunspot.
my very silly sister.
Yeah, it's Allison from MilwaukeeGhost.com and HawaiiParacon.com.
And also coming back, we got What's Your Ghost Story? We got
Scott Marcus. And I do have to point out that Wendy keeps the time on the songs and here on the show. So she's really the pace setter.
Nice.
And then a special guest today, we are joined by our friend and paranormal author, Charles Martin. Chuck, how you doing?
All right.
All right.
Welcome.
So
Welcome,
coming at
Chuck.
you- So anybody have any movies that they're rooting for tonight at the Academy Awards?
Oh boy, I mean, I don't even know what's up for an award. I'm so out of it, and we as a family should still be into it because in the '80s, our mom won a trip to the Academy Awards, so it's kind of a special memory for us.
It's a family event.
Yeah.
Here.
Oh yeah, we used to watch it every single year, and we try to watch the movies and stuff like that before, as long as they were appropriate. And then anything that won, we would go see after it did. So no, always loved the
fun.
Oscars. Even in college, we used to have Oscar parties, and you'd make little ballots, and whoever you'd have some kind of prize for whoever got the most number of winners correct, and they'd usually start with like maybe champagne or something like that, and it would end with whatever was in the fridge, ended like Mountain Dew and vodka is how you'd close the evening.
Milwaukee's best.
Yeah.
Right. So you start with something classy, and then you'd end up crap-faced, just like a real Oscars party.
But I didn't realize beyond the alcohol, there's actually an Oscars curse. This is something that I'm learning about today for the first time.
Oh well.
Oh, so you didn't listen a year ago.
Last February, we talked about the Oscar love curse,
Oops.
and that was how traditionally people say that the women who won the Best Actress award tended to be Splitsville with their husbands or with their boyfriends shortly after winning the award. And so this happened to everybody from Mary Steenburgen, Jessica Lange, Gina Davis broke up with Jeff Goldblum right after Accidental Tourist. Kim Basinger broke up with Alec Baldwin after L.A. Confidential. This happened to a ton of people, and just recently, the Oscar love curse has struck again, my friends.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes. Captain Marvel herself, Brie Larson, who won the 2016 Oscar for the movie Room, which was the feel-good movie of 2016 for people that like to keep women trapped in their basements.
There's a market for anything,
There is, right. Obviously, there's more people doing it than we thought about, so that movie is for them. So she was engaged to musician Alex Greenwald, lead singer of the band Phantom Planet.
Oh, with Jason Schwartzman.
Well,
He's
yes,
in that band, too.
Yeah, he's no longer in the band, but Jason Schwartzman, Rushmore himself. No, he wasn't. He didn't play Rushmore, but that just was his best movie. Yeah, he was the drummer in Phantom Planet. Alex Greenwald was the singer and songwriter, and he was going out with Brie Larson, but their engagement ended this January.
Aww.
After nominees were announced.
Right. That's
what did it him.
So that's what happened. So Phantom Planet's best known for their track California, which was the theme song for the OC.
And I'm telling you, I lived in California. I lived in L.A. when that song first came out, and it was on all the time. Mm-hmm. So it kind of was our anthem out there.
Yeah, no, Californians love to write songs about themselves and then sing them. The Beach Boys wrote a whole song about the ladies, and they're like, hey, I wish they all could be. So that's the update on the Oscar love curse. Brie Larson is the latest in the falling victim to her relationship breaking up after being a big winner in Academy Award gold. But I mean, people think that they're cursed after winning Academy Awards all the time.
Yeah, Tom Hanks, his career's never been the same.
Right. He's done it. And this is like anything. I think when it comes to these kind of superstitions and curses and stuff, because you can almost find you can find an example and you can find an exception to the rule for almost anything.
Yeah. A lot of people say that the winning Best New Artist at the Grammys is a career-ending curse type thing. But, I think the Beatles won it too. So it's not obviously taking everybody down.
Right. Just because it took down Milli Vanilli
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's going to take your career down. And when you think about the Academy Awards, a lot of times the awards go to either people who are brand new, who maybe have not been tested yet in their career, or they go to the people who are kind of at the end of things.
That's true.
And it's given to them as an award. Like, not everybody's going to be Matthew McConaughey, who started off as a lightweight kind of thing, and then he's making commercials and everybody thinks he's a joke, who's just better known for his abs than his ability. And then he comes out swinging with the Dallas Buyers Club, and we go through the reconnaissance, and now everything he touched, the things he touched mostly turn to gold. When you think about winners who might have been cursed, they say Cuba Gooding Jr.'s career never was the same after Jerry Maguire. Yeah. You got him there. Mercedes Rule won for The Fisher King. That was such a great movie. Terry Gilliam's movie with Robin Williams and Jeff Bridges, and she was the girlfriend in that movie and did such a great job. But then you haven't really heard about her much since then. Kim Basinger hasn't had a good movie role since she won for LA Confidential. But the thing is, Kim Basinger was known for like young, attractive woman roles, and so there's also the curse of being.
She's none of those things anymore.
Right. There's also the curse of being over 40 in Hollywood.
Sure.
Where, that's got its own curse. Like, you don't have to win gold to not be employable after you turn 40 years old.
Especially if you're a woman, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Especially.
So, the things they talk about with these curses, I think they're just, a lot of times it's just puff pieces. Even though, take somebody like Roberto Benigni, who was already a very famous Italian comedian when he won for Life is Beautiful, which was a comedy set in a concentration camp. And you think
not
it's
since
not
Hogan's Heroes has it.
Right. And you think it's not going to work, but then you see the movie and it's great. It's very powerful. It's
very powerful, yeah.
Yeah. But then Roberto Benigni hasn't really been in anything groundbreaking since then, 20 years.
Well, you wonder too if they want my big drive is I want to one day win an Oscar, and then you do it, and maybe your drive isn't there as much. You can start endorsing hot dogs for it to make ends meet, and that's you can just lay back now.
Yeah, or work on your next dream.
Yeah,
it's the whole peaking early thing. Think about the kid from The Sixth Sense or whatever.
Sure.
Oh, Haley Joel Osment. Yeah.
He's back now.
Yeah.
Though.
Yeah.
I did see he's in Future Man.
Oh,
and
yeah,
he was on The X-Files. Come on.
What I'm saying is he peak early with that movie like that. You're like, I'm the see dead people kid. And
I
the
know.
rest of your life, it's like...
he was so powerful.
Yeah.
He
It's
should have
like
been
Jason...
cast in The Phantom Menace. I mean, if you want a kid who looks really troubled.
Well, and Jake Lloyd, speaking of cursed, Jake Lloyd says that movie ruined his life.
The Phantom Menace?
Yeah, the kid that played Anakin Skywalker.
Oh, man.
So, that idea. Obviously, there's no supernatural curse associated with that particular film besides Jar Jar Binks being supernaturally stupid. It would take, I think it would take a beyond human, some kind of extraterrestrial intellectual capacity to create a character like Jar Jar Binks and think, you know what? This is going to work.
He's so strong. He can have his own spin-off. We can morph this guy up. Yeah.
He's gonna be huge. What? Yeah, make him sound like a racist caricature? Yeah, of course. People love that stuff.
Oh, man.
Okay. So the thing is, Academy Awards, is there a curse? According to science, not really. But we do have the...
If you want to hear the episode we did last year about it, it is episode 185, and you can find it at othersidepodcast.com/185, and you can hear about all of the other interesting Oscar lore
And interestingly, for the show notes on that one, I did an expose looking at all of the haunted Oscar locations where the theaters, where the ceremony was held. And there's a lot. Like, I knew that there were a handful, but from the very first one at the Roosevelt Hotel, it's in a ballroom that is still has a cold spot constantly there where the podium stood. So maybe the Oscars themselves are cursed from the very first go.
Well, that's what we're going to find out tonight. So whoever wins tonight, we hope something horrible happens to them shortly afterwards. So we can have an episode next year called The Oscar Curse.
Yeah. Well, as you say, it's probably a puff piece. But, I mean, there are countless instances of curses cross-culturally over millennia. So there might be something.
Okay, so let's say I wanted to curse you, because the thing about cursing or cursing someone, it's funny because when someone says profanity, we say they're using curse words. So if or swear words. And that's funny. The thing is, because like swearing, you think of swearing an oath or whatever on the Bible if you're in court.
That's where I usually do it.
Yeah, but that's because swearing and cursing both occupy the same like religious space to some people. Okay? So if you say to somebody, damn you to hell, that's invoking God's name because you're asking God to do your dirty work for you. And when you're saying an oath, like when you say "so help you God," or the bailiffs in there going, "Tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God," and you're like, "Thank you, Judge Wapner." That saying God in there is also breaking one of the 10 commandments: "You shall not take God's name in vain." So that's the same kind of thing. So some people, you know how sometimes you read some religious books and they don't actually say the word God; they have G/D. That's that same idea that you don't just say God's name willy-nilly.
It's sacred.
Yeah, it's sacred. And so when you do something that violates the sacred, it's called profane, and you're saying profanity. So that's essentially the idea of cursing or swearing kind of occupies that same kind of space. And so, but if I wanted to curse somebody, I'm not just going to say, damn you to hell. I'm probably going to look at you funny. And how would you look at somebody funny to curse them? Allison, you understand this because you talked about this in the Milwaukee tour. And I've seen you curse people.
Mostly you, Mike. But yeah, even in Milwaukee, I did not know this, but, our Italian community here had a strong tradition of Malocchio, which means the evil eye. Ooh. And I had not realized that the area that I primarily do tours right now, the Third Ward of Milwaukee, that was Milwaukee's Little Italy for decades. And people would come to our Little Italy to seek out what were called evil eye doctors, which, sounds like ophthalmologists trying to take over the world. But no, it was female faith healers who would help you with your spiritual ailments. So they would feel that one of the most potent curses was also the most ubiquitous. Malocchio is the idea that you can be cursed just by a look. And the most scary thing about it is that, of course, a witch could curse you intentionally, but Malocchio is usually unintentional. That even your best friend, just in a moment of jealousy or envy, could look at you in a certain way, and it could actually do you physical harm. So you would see, yeah. And so that was the scary thing about it, because when you think about being in public, the eyes of everyone are upon you. So just think about how dangerous it was even to walk out the front door or even in your own home, because one of your family members, if they felt jealousy, just that flare of that green monster coming up could actually cause you to become physically ill.
Makes me think of that saying that you're staring daggers at someone.
Yes. So, and it would just happen many times unintentionally, but then you would go to an evil eye doctor and they would take this basin of holy water and they draw a cross in it with olive oil. And if the cross remained, you were fine. But if the oil dispersed, you were cursed. And then, so the evil eye doctors would perform elaborate rituals upon you to lift the curse of the evil eye. But the problem is that we still don't know the exact formula for the rituals to cure the evil eye, because were held so secret amongst families, and they still are even today. I have families who have been on the tour who are still actively practicing the tradition. And, some of them offered to tell me, but I said, I don't know if you should, because if the evil eye is a real thing, the idea is if the cure gets out, it'll lose its power. And you don't want to lose your only defense against a curse that's ubiquitous. So we do know that the cure involves the laying on of hands and incantations, many, many prayers, but we don't know much more than that, because the tradition is only passed down among family members, and only at one specific time of year, only on Christmas Eve, can it be passed down to a family member. So only at midnight on Christmas Eve can you pass that on. And that's the only time you ever talk about it.
It's just a very special Christmas gift.
Right. It's a very sacred gift, yes.
And that special gift was given to Ronnie James Dio.
Right. So you gave me that story, Mike. So Mike, for you guys who don't know, I mean, he's more than a musician. He's also a writer, and he's interviewed a lot of notables in the rock and roll industry. One of them being Ronnie James Dio, who claimed responsibility for what do you call that symbol, Mike?
The metal horns.
Okay, the metal horns.
Rock fist.
Yeah,
What-
the rock fist.
The rock fist or metal horns. Okay, so in Italian tradition, it is called manu cornuta, and it is the bull's horns, the hand horns. And so this was something that he said he got from his Italian grandmother. And this was a way to ward off the evil eye. If you didn't have amulet or those little gold horns that Italian men often wear, if you didn't have any of those amulets of protection on you, if you felt you were coming under the power of the evil eye, you could make the manu cornuta. And so that was something that when you were telling me, Mike, that 1981, when Ozzy left the band. Yeah, tell the story.
They kicked Ozzy out of Black Sabbath because he was a wastoid in the early 80s.
Oh,
And
they
he partied
kicked him
too much.
out.
Yeah, and so Ozzy was not getting along with either Butler or Tony Iommi or Bill Ward, and they were friends with Dio because Dio played in Rainbow with Ritchie Blackmore, and he hung around with all these English metal guys, and they just really hit it off. And so Ozzy would always make the peace sign. He
Right,
would
like the
always throw up
double
his hand.
peace sign, like Nixon.
Yeah.
At the end of
Yeah,
the shows.
Right, and so Ozzy would throw up that, and everybody would give the peace sign back. And Dio wanted to he thought he had to have a hand movement when he replaced Ozzy as the lead singer of Black Sabbath.
Yeah. So he's like, we got to do something. We got to keep up with those hand symbols, the gesture.
Yeah.
It's all in the gesture, baby.
And so he'd throw up the horns that his grandmother taught him to ward off the evil eye, and the horns would act like the antenna. Like the idea is that and I want to say menudo, even though it's not called the menudo, I know. But the horns would act like an antenna, and they would pick up the evil eye and distribute, like get rid of that evil energy before it got to you. So you
Right.
held them up as a defense. So
Like
you can either do
deflect
that.
it.
Yeah. So if you think you're getting under the influence of the evil eye, you can either like throw up the horns, you can put on Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath, which is the best non-Ozzy album they ever made, and you can do that.
Anthropologists who have studied the evil eye have pointed out that it goes back all the way to ancient Mesopotamia, to when those female statues, those statues of the goddess that were very voluptuous originally, changed so that they were stick thin with huge eyes on top, kind of like our supermodels of today. A little editorial comment there, but anyway, so they changed from this voluptuous form to a thin figure whose most prominent feature were these two bulging eyes. So that's the idea of the evil eye as a very female power, and the bull's horns were like the male counteraction to block the power of the evil eye.
And that's how Dio kind of talked though too. And it's funny in the interview. I just want to bring this up. It's just because I didn't put it in the writing, but I thought it was funny. He was like, "Yeah, I see a lot of women-fronted metal bands," and he's the very, he just says like, "I just don't think they can do it." And I'm like, Jesus, Ronnie.
No, you didn't.
I'm like, I just took the Lord's name in vain too. But okay, so I'm like, well, and he just goes in. He's like, yeah, if it's gonna be metal to me, I need a pair of balls.
Oh,
and
come on.
Yeah, and he really throws that out there. But what antiquated ideas of masculinity versus femininity in music and metal and things like that to side, the fact that you bring up the devil horns, the Dio horns, that to fight off the evil eye are a masculine antidote to a feminine energy, and then he's like, I just don't think chicks can do metal. I need a pair of balls. And I could hear the chest hair like falling off his tongue.
Started pounding his chest too while he was doing it.
But that idea of the masculine and feminine energies competing, I find it very anthropologically interesting, whether we're talking about the 5th century BC or whether talking about 1940s New York City where Ronnie James Dio grew up. You have those same kind of things. And that idea of like an older woman in your family cursing you. Now, Chuck, you mentioned that you might have that kind of thing in your own family.
Sort of, yeah. The story that I heard was I have 2 grandmothers that were best friends. Well, I don't know if they were best friends. They were friends. They worked together. And they weren't very happy when my mother and father eloped. And it kind of broke up their friendship. And both of them were very bitter towards me growing up. And one day, one of them slipped up and told me that, well, your other grandmother should never have said that she wished you were stillborn. And I'm like, excuse me? And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This explains why in all the photos of, the family gathers around and take pictures with the baby, she's the only one that's not smiling. Everybody else is excited because, here's another. I was only like the second grandchild on one side of my dad's side, and on my mother's side, I was the first one. And I could never understand, why is Grandma frowning? Why does she look so pissed? So I've always thought of it as a curse, not like where she's inflicted anything on me from other sources. She verbally cursed me at birth and then kind of was mean to me my whole life. And I could never understand why until I got older. I'm like, oh, now I get it. Okay.
So
she didn't like the elopement. That's the problem.
Oh, but it wasn't your fault, Chuck. Jeez.
Right.
Oh, well, yeah.
That's biblical in itself. The sins of the father shall be visited upon the son when you're like, I didn't do nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And when my parents got divorced, I thought she'd be happy, but, apparently not. So the damage was already done.
I picture her as one of the people that are in the Rosemary's Baby clan, just very kind of twisted.
Well, she was a member of the Eastern Star, and I always thought of them as very cult-like when I was a kid because nobody was allowed in the chamber where they held their service. If you're not familiar with Eastern Star, it's like a female offshoot of the Masons.
Yeah, the female.
And and they've got like this secret chamber with a big 5-pointed star painted on it, and I don't know. I went to the building once with them and had to wait in some room while my grandfather and her went through the ceremony. But other than that, no witchcraft or anything. She was a organist for the local church and even taught piano lessons. So, but she was a very angry lady.
Oh.
It seems like more anger or misdirected rage than anything else. But just that idea of cursing or being cursed and doing that to somebody else, that's where you got to bring up the the bullhorns to ward that off. Or
if only I had known that.
Well, the thing is now, Chuck, you think you've had experiences with a couple of curses and stuff yourself, and this was, you guys know Chuck is one of our awesome Patreon community, and we've been friends with him for well over a year now, and we always say that if anybody has a great idea for an episode, to send us an email and let us know. Well, Chuck had a great idea for an episode about curses, and we thought it'd be perfect to follow up our Oscar curse episode with another curse episode, and he had a couple of stories himself. Now, didn't you say that you think you've had a curse touch you in your own life, and your latest book that we've discussed before, Stranger Than Fiction?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I always have bad luck. It's kind of like a running joke. Kids getting sick, cars breaking down. Everybody has that in their life. But when I decided to write this collection of ghost stories and Fortean stuff that I had gathered over my lifetime, I had like an increased number of bad luck things happen. For example, in 2017, my wife was in a car wreck. She wasn't that badly hurt, but it was a car we'd only had for like 5 months. That in and of itself, that doesn't seem like anything. But then our daughter got diagnosed with scoliosis. Then I fell down the steps at the house and messed my ankle up and was laid up for a while on that. Then the following year, our daughter, we found out that all the physical therapy we'd been taking her to wasn't good enough. She was going to have surgery. She had the surgery. Thankfully, there were no complications. Then in July of last year, our dog died, just out of the blue, like with no warning sign or anything. We think she had eaten something and it lodged in her intestines. And I had a lot of other just really weird little things. When they happen, you don't think anything of it. But when you sit down and you make a list, it's like, wow, these really have been 2 sucky years.
Yeah, things really pile up sometimes.
Yeah, well, the coup de grace was just last week. I was leaving my day job, walking down the hall, and I was thinking, I got to come up with a way to promote this ghost story book. I've got a couple free days left on Kindle. I don't want to waste them. And as I'm thinking about that, 2 birds outside just dive bomb the window I'm walking towards. Bam, bam, and bounce off the window. And I was like, well, that's like right out of a cheesy B movie.
Yeah,
what the heck?
Totally. So, Chuck, why do you think, though, that the publication of your book would be a problem? I mean, who do you think you ticked off?
Well, I think it's more of a thing where when you put these things in your life, you attract these things. I know a lot of the ghost hunters talk about that if you're into it and you keep going to the houses, you can bring stuff home. I don't know. It could go either way. It could be purely psychological, where this was a lot of bad stuff and the ideas popped in my head, now I can't get it out.
Sure.
Or maybe it's because I was really dwelling on this stuff and writing it down and remembering stories and contacting people about additional stories to add to the book, talking to my friends who have ghost stories of their own so I can include those in the book. I kind of think it was, I got into that world too much, and so then that world bleeds over into mine. Or I imagined it all.
Right. So when you look into the phenomena, it starts looking back at you.
Right,
Yes.
right.
That's the Nietzschean abyss. Right?
That's right.
That who's, beware when you stare into the abyss, it might stare back. Man.
Yeah.
So cosmic.
Yeah. So, but that's, really interesting that as you were, working on this book and the publication of it, just thinking about it caused some birds to commit suicide near you. But didn't you also have a friend who seemed to have been cursed? Now, this is something I think is really interesting, too, because this gets in the realm of cursed objects.
Yeah, this is the most compelling of the cursed stories I've ever heard. A guy I was stationed with, I don't want to say which base, and I'm not going to use his name, but he had been in Europe and was stationed in Italy, and at that time the U.S. Air Force was building what were called GLCM bases, GLCM, ground-launched cruise missiles. Those were where they had trucks with nuclear missiles on them. The idea was you could drive it around anywhere you wanted, launch it, the Soviets wouldn't know where it was to stop it. And they had a base that these trucks would be based in and out of. And as he told the story, they picked some land in Italy. The Italian government said, yeah, you can build a base here. It had been a former Nazi site in World War II, and one of the buildings that was left over, they busted the seals on it, the padlocks and chains and everything, and the American forces were trying to evaluate, is this something we can use, or do we just need to bulldoze it and fill it in with concrete? I was in what was called the security police at that time. They're called security forces. And our job was to secure sites on installations, control who comes onto an Air Force base, who leaves, providing all the security. And that's what my friend did. And so one night he finds himself guarding this site that's open. So, of course, him and his partner decide to go inside and check it out. That's one of the drawbacks of being in security forces is you are around a lot of really neat stuff. and you're not really supposed to go certain places, but inevitably there's guys who like, hey man, let's go check this out. And when they went inside,
That's what I'd be like.
Mischief makers.
I'd be the other one they'd put me in jail right away.
Yeah, like, don't touch this airplane you're guarding, and then the next shift comes on and there's fingerprints all over the airplane.
There's a saddle on top of it.
I don't want to say what airplane it is, but the oil from human fingerprints degrades the special paint that's on this one aircraft. And so it's a dead giveaway somebody's been touching the plane, because the ground maintenance crews wipe it all down. Otherwise, they'd have to reapply this special paint.
Special terrible paint. Yeah.
Is it just fingerprints, or do people like press their other butt anyway?
Okay.
No, just fingerprints like on the nose of the airplane or on the side.
Yeah, I'm just saying something.
Yeah.
Like airplanes can be sexy.
Oh, please no.
Well, I don't want to say
Not
what plane
this
it is.
again.
So,
All right.
yeah. So back to Italy. So he goes inside this bunker, and he said it was like everybody just vanished. Like there was cups of coffee sitting out. Obviously they're moldy and dried out and everything because they've been there for 40 or 50 years.
Wow.
Charts on the wall, papers on tables. I mean, they literally just ran away. Oh my God, the Americans are coming, and abandoned it. So he sees this Nazi SS ceremonial dagger laying out, and he's thinking, hey, cool, souvenir. And he picks it up and takes it. Again, I saw a lot of guys do stuff like that, take
Seems like a great
souvenirs
idea
from
at the
places. Yeah. I was always horrified. Oh my God, we're going to get caught. Put that back. What are you doing? I was never brave enough to do that. But my friend did, and he said ever since he had it, he just had a ton of bad luck. Like I talked about with writing my book, only worse. And it culminated for him with his child. He had a son who contracted. He got stationed later in Panama. And while they were there, his kid got some kind of disease and had this super high temperature, almost died, ended up with brain damage. And when it was over with, his son was kind of autistic, but like angry all the time. And they had a lot of problems, developmental problems with him. So when he was done in Panama, he decided it's got to be this dagger. He was convinced of it. So before they left, he buried it in the backyard of his house that was, base housing. The Air Force has houses for some families. Other families have to find housing off base. Depends on the base you're at. He had on base housing. He buried it in the backyard. They moved. Problem solved. No more bad luck. Now who knows if the next person that moved in had any bad luck. But, this was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years later that I met him and met his son and all that. And he was absolutely convinced that Nazi dagger was the source of all his problems.
Wow. And that's just the kind of thing, that's the kind of cursed artifact or whatever. Of course it's going to be a Nazi thing.
Yeah.
Right.
The stakes couldn't be higher for that.
Yeah, it's like finding something from the Knights Templar or whatever. You find that stuff, and it's like obviously you're finding something held not just by like a regular German grunt who had to go to the war, but by the SS, who were the like. You find the psychos, you put them all in one room, and then you let them loose, and that becomes the SS. And, of course that's going to have a weird energy just around it in the first place. And so the fact that he was convinced and all the bad luck happened, because, and that he thought it was okay to tell you about too. I'm not, of course I'm not crazy, but I did bury a dagger in the backyard because I thought it was giving me bad luck.
Well, I did get some other stories from him that are in the book. And he was somebody who was reluctant to talk about that stuff at first, but we worked together a lot. And on night shift, inevitably, ghost stories come up. And, after you tell a few, people become more loose-lipped and they're more willing to tell stories like that. So it was probably 5 or 6 months after I was at my new posting with him that I finally started getting these stories out of him.
Nice. Well, that's pretty powerful. And, of course, if you guys want to pick up a copy of Stranger Than Fiction, the link will be in the show notes where you can grab a copy of Chuck's book and the fascinating Forteana that he has gathered over a lifetime of investigative research.
And we don't have any evidence that the book itself will put a curse on you. So
It's on my
I've read
Kindle
it.
now, and it still
Yeah.
operates.
We've all
so.
read it, and
Yeah.
well, so far so good. So
It's on
Don't
my
worry.
Kindle, and the only thing I can say is the only way to break the curse of Chuck's book is to read it.
Yeah, there you go.
That's how I say the only way to break the curse is to read. No, it's a good book, and I highly recommend it. It's interesting stories, and I feel like Chuck's not going to say anything that I don't believe, or that I don't believe at least is coming from a place of someone searching for the truth instead of somebody who's just making some crap up to make a couple of bucks. So make sure you check out that book. Now, speaking of books, now, Scott Marcus, you've got a curse story in one of your volumes, do you
Yes. Yeah, and actually, talking about cursed objects, my first foray into the paranormal was 1999. I did a documentary with a couple of friends. We were up to no good. Sorry. And one of the first places we went to was the Resurrection Mary area. And this actually wasn't what I'm going to talk about fully, but this Archer Woods Cemetery, it was the scariest place. Like, it felt unnerving in daylight, partially because it was just a place that it's still an active cemetery. Like, they still have new burials and all that, but it's just not managed very well. It's not taken care of. So people go in there and do who knows what kind of weird stuff. Are they cultists? Do they get into that kind of stuff there? It's possible. We saw all sorts of just odd things that you wouldn't normally see at a cemetery that's being taken care of, including like stuffed animals and other statues and whatnot hanging by nooses from trees.
Hey.
So naturally, we took one of them.
seems like a great idea.
Yeah,
As you do.
we should clean up. We'll take some of this terrible stuff
Garbage.
Right. This is going to look great in my office.
down. Exactly. And my one of my co-hosts on the documentary had it in his car, and I think for the first week after that, he got 2 speeding tickets. He failed a test. Something got spoiled between he and his girlfriend, and so he was convinced that we took bad energy and it's plaguing him now, and he had to get rid of it. And I said, "Yeah, I'll take it. You make stupid decisions. You do dumb things. Dumb things will happen. There just so happens to be a bizarre object in the back of your car." Now, I will say, I didn't let it in the house for a while just to be safe. But now it's actually just part of my weird collection of things that you pick up doing this kind of stuff, and no curse there. But Chicago has a lot of colorful, strange history, and one of the more unique characters is a guy by the name of Streeter, Captain George Streeter. He was a Civil War. He fought captain for the Union, and he did all sorts of different things. I mean, he was very much a promotions guy, a Barnum Bailey type. He had traveling sideshows a little bit, and he got into the theater world. But his love was the sea. So at one point he went back onto the open waters, but they didn't stay open for very long because he eventually beached his boat on a sandbar about 400 yards off the coast of Lake Michigan, and thought, well, I'm here in my boat. Might as well call this my house. I live here now. And in time, the sandbar was building up. This is the late 1880s. And in time, he started to allow people to dump junk kind of around the sandbar. Chicago was building up after the Chicago fire, so there's all sorts of construction, and he just invited people to throw their construction materials over that way. And it ended up filling in between the shore of Lake Michigan and his sandbar. And now we have several hundred new acres. And he said, well, this is my town. This is not part of Illinois. The Illinois line stops way back at that shore there where the shore originally was. This is my own pristine new state. And of course, many, many, many legal battles ensued. This guy was an absolute character. He defended his land. He eventually had an army of 500 volunteers that would kind of fight for him. He, of course, was able to pay them off with new plots of land in this new state. And so many crazy things happened. So many huge skirmishes where there was real injuries between people, but he was able to claim self-defense. And he was right by the letter of the law, even though who knows what the state laws were, because we didn't yet know if this was part of Illinois or not. That hadn't been determined. One of my favorite ones was the Chicago police alleged that they had one of their carriages shot at by the Streeterville crew. And so they came to arrest him, and he was arrested. And turns out there's no law in the books that said you couldn't shoot at a police carriage. So it's the early days. But in time, eventually, there was a casualty, a fatality that happened while Streeter was patrolling his property. But we don't even know to this day, was that a setup? Did it really happen? How did things go down? Whatever the case, we know all that land today is owned by the state of Illinois. And this finally got settled in 1918. So we're just past the 100-year anniversary of Streeterville. And modern day Streeterville is where the John Hancock Tower is. It's where it's a very wealthy part of Chicago. But it is said that to his dying day, Cap Streeter cursed that land, said, "You took it from me. It is cursed. Screw you all." And that's what he did with his dying breaths. And especially the Hancock Tower is associated with all sorts of bizarre phenomena that people allege is a connection to this curse. My favorite one, because this sounds so like out of the Bible, out of the Old Testament, is that there's twice a year a migration of spiders that crawl up one side of the Hancock Tower en masse across the roof of it and then down the other side. You'd think if the building got put up in their migration pattern, they would find an easier way around it. But, there's a lot of radio stations broadcast out of there, and Steve Dahl broadcast out of there, and he would talk about, today the spiders are walking. He see them coming down the window.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it gets much darker, of course. 1972, Lorraine Kowalski is the most mysterious death that happened on the property. She and her boyfriend were in one of the rooms. If you guys don't know, there's office space for the first several stories, and then high-end apartments from there to the top. And there is the signature room, so you can get a cocktail at the top of the building.
Classy place.
Yes, very, very high-end and beautiful views of the city. But while the boyfriend was in the bathroom washing up for the night, he heard a crash, came out. Lorraine's clothes were all folded neat in a pile, and she had somehow thrown herself through one of the plate glass windows, committing suicide, which obviously that's in and of itself is a sad thing. But that happens. Suicides happen.
Was dinner that bad?
Yeah.
And why would you bother folding your clothes?
There we go.
It's weird.
Well, nobody wants to go out like a slob.
So did she jump? Did she jump naked?
Just think of
Yeah.
the
Is that what
rumors.
she did?
Yeah, she was nude. The double pane glass.
That's a pretty hot way to go.
Oh my!
That's reminiscent of the 411 missing people cases.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if David Palahniuk, is that his last name? Something like that.
No,
David
David
Paulides.
Paulides.
Paulides, yes. I was thinking Chuck Palahniuk.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Is he really interested in missing people, or does he just like the idea of thinking about naked people?
Yeah. So
I think
yeah,
we're
David
pointing a mirror at you now, Mike.
So
Right.
David Paulides talks a lot about people that go missing and finding piles of their clothes, neatly folded. With their shoes on top, like anybody's gonna do that. Like if you're half mad, because you're freezing
Yeah.
to death or something like that.
Sure,
It's
sure.
just I don't even do that at my house.
Yeah.
Like almost ever. So yeah, the idea that you be out in the woods or just before you kill yourself, you fold up your clothes. Yeah, very weird.
Yeah. And the thing that I think makes it more mysterious is that these double-paned window glasses could withstand pressure of 280 pounds per foot. And she was a 130-pound woman. How could she possibly have mustered up the force to be able to go through that?
She hulked out.
Yeah, seriously. Of course, the most famous death is much less mysterious, but still sad and tragic, and that's where Chris Farley passed away, is in the Hancock Tower.
Oh, didn't know that.
Yeah. And then in 2002, there was this windstorm that whipped up on one weekend and sent a bunch of scaffolding on the side of the building that should have been able to withstand a lot of this kind of wind, but it sent it falling to the ground some 80 or so stories, killing 3 people, injuring 8 others, crushing some cars that were parked on the street. And one last bit that I would say is not part of this curse, but a lot of times gets reported, is that Poltergeist Part 3 shot in the Hancock Tower. It shot across the street at Water Tower Place. And of course, it was after that movie that Heather O'Rourke passed away, tragically young, the little blonde girl that said, "They're here." But if anything, I think that's more associated with the case of the curse of the Poltergeist movies themselves, which was a curse that plagued that whole franchise.
Yeah, and we talked about that on the Toby Hooper
Yes.
Hooper episode of See on the Other Side. We went into detail on what might or might not be the truth behind the poltergeist curse. Speaking of Chris Farley and his passing away, the picture of Chris Farley's from the scene where he died is one of the featured exhibits at the Zach Baggins Haunted Museum in Las Vegas.
Dude.
Yeah. And so I'd never seen the picture of like Chris Farley's deathbed or whatever. And I just visited the Haunted Museum for the first time
All right,
this
so
past week.
let's hear about it, Mike.
All right, well, okay, just a little bit. Just speaking of cursed objects. Okay, first of all, it's not like it's near downtown Las Vegas, so it's pretty far away from the Strip. It's about a mile away from like the Fremont Street area, and so we walked there, and so it was a pretty good. It was a pretty good walk. You pass by like the shop from Pawn Stars, like it's one of the things you
Cool.
pass.
I want to go.
Yeah, and then you pass by a couple of the more famous wedding chapels that you see, and then you get there, and it's it doesn't really look that scary. The mansion itself kind of looks like a Ponderosa from the outside. Like
Horrifying.
Let's be honest, that is scary.
right. It's it's really just haunted by like bad nacho cheese. But the thing is, you get there and you find out that the mansion formerly belonged to a guy named Cyril Wengert, who was a bigwig in early Nevada history. Well, more like mid-century Nevada history. He helped establish like the Nevada Energy Company. So like he was a big deal as one of the founders of what we know as Las Vegas now. And they say that the place is haunted, that people have seen weird spirits inside the haunted museum. It was built in like the 1930s.
So it was before he brought all the stuff in there. It already had
Yeah.
its own history. Okay.
They say it was haunted. Also, the Wengerts moved out in the 1970s when Cyril died, and Zach says that there were satanic rituals in the basement. He still sees like pentagrams and stuff down there.
What about the goat man?
Right, the goat man's in the basement. No, okay. And the thing is, you go there, and then when you read about the history of the building, it was law offices after it was, it was a legal office after it was a home, and then eventually became the home to the Nevada State Bar, was in that same building. And so you're thinking, well, lawyers can be evil.
Yeah.
So there might have been some satanic stuff there. But you go there, and number one, the line is huge. Like only 12 people go through at a time through the museum, and it's a guided tour. And you get there, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you might have to wait like a half an hour in line." We waited about an hour and a half in line.
Wow.
Yeah, and you get a waiver, and the waiver says things like, we are not responsible for demonic activity. Anything that happens because of supernatural powers. Like it's a whole.
Your eyes might pop out of your head.
Right.
Are you
And
okay with that? You have to ask yourself. Seriously
cool with the
consider.
devil?
Right. I know you waited an hour and a half, but do you want to send this?
And so you sign the waiver, you wait in line, and this is where it gets interesting. So I'm waiting in line with my wife, and we're just talking, and she laughs about the waiver, and she thinks this is pretty silly, and it's cold outside. It's it's in the 40s on Wednesday, so it's super cold. It ended up snowing that night. Wow, the first time it snowed. Yeah, it snowed all.
Oh my gosh.
They had a snow day for Las Vegas schools the next day. So yeah, it snowed that night. It was freezing when we were there, and so we're waiting outside. And we talked about this, I think, in the wrap up of the Michigan convention this year. We're just talking about some ghost stories, and my wife's not a believer or really into this stuff at all. But I mentioned the idea that John Tenney put forward in the Michigan Paracon this year is that, of course, when you see a ghost or whatever, how can you see something that's non-corporeal, that they can't reflect light? Like your eyes are looking at something, physically that can't exist because it wouldn't reflect light back on you. So then what if when you see a ghost, what you're not seeing is an actual entity in front of you, you're seeing an energy that just touched a neuron in your brain and activated that neuron. So you see your grandmother in her favorite dress because the neuron was activated.
I feel like my neurons are being violated.
Something in your mind created the perception of seeing something when it wasn't actually there. That concept.
Right. And as I was telling her that story, she's like, did you see a little girl?
No.
And so the line is you're next to a fence, and there's a parking lot next door to the Haunted Museum. And she said, let me go back in the description here. As we were sitting there, she's like, well, did you see the little girl run across the parking lot? Because I think she was there, and then she disappeared. And I'm like, what? And she said that as I was telling her that story about the activation of the neurons in the brain, she sees a girl with long brown hair, like waist-length brown hair, and a bluish-gray, old-timey dress running across the parking lot. The girl looked 5 or 6 years old, and then the girl just vanished.
Well, also the
Wow.
fact that your wife is a lawyer, so she's extra sensitive to everything around that house. Probably.
Yeah.
The lawyer stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, so she sees that, and she's like, whoa. And like we had just gotten in line. Like I just, I'm like, I'm taking a picture, I'm putting it on Instagram to be silly or whatever. And then she's like, did you see that?
You already got your money's worth.
Right. So she had an experience.
That's awesome.
And then we go in and they talk about the Wengert children. Like that they had 5 kids, but a boy died young. Before they actually even moved in there. And then they moved in there was only 4 children that lived in the house. And so we were looking online to see if we could find a picture of the Wenger children. And you can actually in the Nevada Historical Society, you can find pictures of the children there. And none of them particularly looked like who she saw running across the street.
Well, maybe it was the neighbor kid or something.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is also she made it sound like the dress was from like even a time before the 1920s. So what she saw seemed to be
Predating.
Predating even the people who lived in the house. But we did, that night when we were talking about it, we were looking through and trying to see if we could find pictures of the kids. And I eventually did find pictures of the kids, and we don't know if they matched up or not. So the jury's still out. But just the fact that she had an experience, somebody didn't even care. She goes to the Haunted Museum with me as a begrudging. She's there, just to satisfy my curiosity. And because the thing is, it's expensive because it's $44 to get in.
Ooh.
Number one's expensive. It's an hour and a half. You wait for a long time. You're greeted by Angry Joe, who's one of the guys who was on the Ghost Adventures a bunch of times with Zach. You're greeted by Angry Joe. And then once you go in, I mean, we could just talk about the stuff they have. It's mostly, if you've seen Deadly Possessions, you've seen most of the stuff inside the Haunted Museum.
Did you see the staircase from the demon house?
Absolutely, I saw the staircase from the demon house. That's the very last exhibit. And they actually let you opt out of certain things. Like, it's half the stuff is cursed objects, and half the stuff is just haunted house style. Like the scariest thing is actually this clown room, like this clown maze. And I feel bad about this because Chris was freaked out by the clown maze.
Oh no.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'll find the guide. I don't want to go through it. So I just start going through it, and I didn't realize that the guide was already past us.
Oh,
and the clown
no.
maze is one of the rooms that you can't opt out of. So she just had to go through it alone. And I'm at the end, and she's like, "You son of a bitch." So it was great. And the clown maze wasn't haunted. It was just scary. But it's a lot of it's serial killer stuff. So it's things, you're talking about Rosemary's Baby, obviously directed by Roman Polanski, and he was married to Sharon Tate, who was, murdered along with their child.
By the Manson family, yeah.
By the Manson family, and he's got Charles Manson's ashes there.
What?
From the cremation.
Wow.
Yeah, so Charles Manson's ashes are in there. Ted Bundy's glasses, like the glasses that they found with Ted Bundy.
Yeah, the only ones that will correct the damage that was done at the demon house.
Right. And he's got some serial killers I never heard of, like a whole torture setup, and they redo the torture setup, and that was more dark.
Yeah, just
than
exploitive.
haunted, so like the dark stuff is a little hard.
There's
but about 30 different rooms.
Bela
Go
Lugosi's
ahead.
mirror, right? Isn't there some stories behind that? And he has that.
Yes. And so the thing is, the mirror was in the house that Bela Lugosi used to live in. And so the woman who was living in the house said that she saw weird things in the mirror. Now, I don't know if they can particularly trace it to actually Bela Lugosi owned it, but it was a mirror that was in a house he used to own. And so you look in the mirror, and it's like, some people see dark things. And I'm like, I want to see dark things. And I look at it, and I don't see anything. The only thing that kind of freaked me out, I mean, the serial killer stuff gets to you after a while.
Oh,
and like
yeah.
Dr. Kevorkian's van. Like they have a whole setup of like Dr. Kevorkian's van, like where he killed people.
Assisted them.
There's like a marionette room because Zach is afraid of clowns, dolls, and circus stuff. And so he collects that stuff. So there's a marionette room, and the marionette, like the female marionette in the front was moving, like her hand was moving up.
Ooh.
And her head moved like this. And I saw him like, that's weird. And then somebody else sees it. And one of the guides told me, like, no, we have no mechanics in that room whatsoever. And then another guide said they did. The thing is, that you have like 6 or 7 different guides. They're horrible.
Oh, no.
Like, no, they really are. The guides aren't very good. Like, if you could just walk through, like, the rooms are beautifully set up. They're really staged well. The lighting, the sound, it's like an extreme haunted house.
Cool.
It's extreme. It is like walking into a haunted house designed by a Mountain Dew gorging 15-year-old.
Otherwise known as Zach Baggins.
Yeah. And so anyway, is it worth a visit? Yeah, because the thing is, like, you see the Dybbuk box, but we were talking about attachments before. The one that I thought was the funniest was, because you don't get to take any pictures, no video, no anything. And then you go see Peggy, the possessed doll. And so she's like a little doll, and they even have a quote from Greg and Dana Newkirk, their Week in Weird
cool
website, that says, like, this doll makes people vomit. And they've got a spirit box going the whole time in this doll room, and then you can ask the doll questions.
That's cool.
Wait a second. Does anybody try the vomiting thing? I mean, are there little like airport bags like next to her?
prove
That's
it.
a good idea.
You know, like
That would be
buckets?
awesome.
I mean, how are they going to keep the museum clean?
But
It's a room. It's a tile room. They can hose it down afterwards.
Right. I guess it would have to be, right?
that would be great. But when you go into the room, the spirit box is, first of all, it's blasted.
Eh.
And you can just ask questions. And like, it didn't say anything, whatever, but everybody seemed like timid to ask questions. And I was just like, because they say, well, say hello and say goodbye when you walk in and walk out, because Peggy's been known to affect people in a negative way. And Peggy freaked my wife out too, because she's like, I looked her in the eye. So when and that means she came with me, because the whole time they're warning you about attachments. And so the rest of the weekend, whenever we had something unlucky happen, or the snow or whatever,
Damn it,
we'd just be
Peggy.
like,
You were
"Yep,
cursed.
Damn it, Peggy, you came with us." But it's a fun thing. Visually, it's a really interesting place. We can talk more about cursed items and stuff like that in another episode and go into it. But the really exciting thing, first of all, is that Chris had an experience, and she's not an experiencer kind of person. And so she was just matter of fact, she's like, "Did you see that girl?" I'm like, "No, I didn't." And she's like, "I saw something." And then like the Demon House steps and the cursed cauldron of Ed Gein, we'll talk about on an Ed Gein specific episode, because it makes some claims that I think are rather dubious. But
Oh, yes.
but I'm not going to blame that entire one on Zach Baggins. We can blame a local Wisconsin guy for that. And that's a teaser for another episode we'll have when we talk about our man Ed.
Yes. Well, thank you, Chuck, for this great idea for an episode of curses.
Yeah, it was.
You're welcome.
And for sharing your own experiences with potential curses.
And so make sure you visit the show notes and check out Chuck's book, Stranger Than Fiction. It is a good deal, and the only way to help this man break his curse is by reading this book from beginning to end.
And then giving it 5 stars on Amazon.
That's true. All right, Scott, thank you for the Cap Streeter curse story. Where can people find more about the weird stuff you like?
Just ask me. Now, what'syourghoststory.com, or you can find me on YouTube as well, where I post some videos.
And Allison, if people want to know how to get in touch with you and see your weird self,
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel too, youtube.com/Mothman, and you can always find out more about me and weird stuff I'm planning at hawaiiparacon.com.
Wendy, where can they listen to our weird songs?
Ooh, you can check them out at sunspotuniverse.com, or just look them up on Spotify or iTunes.
That's right. In an episode about curses, we had to discuss the power of belief and the power of suggestion. And those are both influenced by superstition. And fighting the natural urge to believe in superstition is one of the most difficult battles a person can fight. So that's the theme of this week's Paranormal Song of the Week, and it's called Man vs. Self. You can listen to the song by checking out the show notes at othersidepodcast.com/237, or you can check out our Spotify playlist, See You on the Other Side Songs of the Week. Check it out. And like we mentioned before, this episode topic was suggested by Chuck Martin, one of our fabulous Patreon communities, and one of the reasons we wanted to feature him in this particular episode. Great idea, great author, and our Patreon community might be the coolest frickin' people in the world.
I love them, and I want to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporter, Ned. Dr. Ned. So awesome.
Doc Ned, he's at the level where we give him a shout out in every single episode. We want you to be at that level too, friends. So make sure you check that out at othersidepodcast.com/donate.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at othersidepodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
By the way, I'm not liable for any equipment malfunctions due to the curse.
Oh, man. Oh, gosh. Yeah, everybody save, and save again.
Yes.